Welcome to the Prickly Pears Net presentation of the OODA Loop. OODA is an acronym meaning observe, orient, decide, and act. It's a loop because you'll repeat these steps as many times as necessary to resolve the issue you're addressing. It was developed back in the 1950s by an Air Force colonel named John Boyd. With the introduction of jet fighters, everything was happening faster, and pilots were having trouble handling the added speed and complexity of air combat. The OODA Loop was designed to help them. But as it turns out, the OODA Loop is helpful to anyone needing to cope with a crisis. So how does the loop work? First we observe, then orient, then decide, then act, then observe again. Repeat the process as often as necessary. The loop begins with observation. If you're not paying attention, you can't possibly cope with whatever happens. So you must be aware of your surroundings at all times. What might prevent that? Distractions like a cell phone, or perhaps you had a beer or two. When we're trying to understand our observation skills, it helps to refer to Jeff Cooper's color codes. According to Cooper, when we're completely oblivious to our surroundings, we're in condition white. Now, this may be appropriate when you're at home in the bathtub sipping a flute of champagne, but when you're out and about, it's a very dangerous condition. You'd be much better off in condition yellow, where you're relaxed and alert. You're able to observe things around you without panicking, just paying attention. And if something does pop up that's out of the ordinary, then you're in condition orange. You focus your attention on that event or that person until you realize it's not a problem and you go back to condition yellow, or you're prepared to move on into condition red, which means you're in a fight or some kind of a crisis. And so you can see that normally for the observed part of the OODA loop, we want to be in condition yellow. The orient phase is arguably the most critical of all the steps because it determines how we process the information presented by our senses. This phase is going to be heavily affected by training and experience. For instance, if you and I are walking down the street together and a man collapses on the sidewalk in front of us, how each of us reacts to that is going to differ depending on the amount of training or experience we have with similar situations. In this stage, we're not making a decision. We're preparing to make a decision. We may ask ourselves, is this a problem? How big a problem is this? Or we might ask ourselves, can I get back into the store rather than have to deal with this? Or we might say to ourselves, if he does X, I'm going to do Y. Now, what might interfere with orienting? Our old friend, physical state. It's always present. But also things like denial. This can't be happening to me. Or an emotional filter. I hate violence, and it looks like this is going to be a violent encounter. Now, denial and emotional filter are very natural reactions, but they can get us killed because they don't allow us to deal with what's in front of us. That's why training can be so helpful. If you've been observant and you're well oriented, the decision should be the quickest part of the loop. You simply pick a course of action. Now be sure to keep it simple. More choices mean a slower response. Also, it can lead to analysis paralysis. You're sitting there wrestling with a whole number of options. It increases stress and uncertainty. So if you're going to carry a weapon, for instance, don't carry 5 weapons. Carry one and know how to use it. Brake light theory applies here. This is a simple concept. When you're in the car and the car in front of you touches his brakes and you see those red lights, you don't discuss their significance with your spouse. You don't debate what you should do next. And you don't pick from a half dozen different switches, buttons, and pedals. You simply put your foot on the brake and apply the appropriate pressure. That's because you really only have one choice and you know what to do with it from experience and I hope training. That's what we're talking about here. The act phase is pretty well a no-brainer. You just carry out your decision. Now remember that after acting, you're going to observe the results and re-enter the loop until the thread is resolved. Repeat the OODA loop as often as necessary to take care of the issue. Thanks for spending time today with the Prickly Pears Net. Hope to see you again soon.